College was a chapter I never thought would end. It wasn't just about lectures and exams. It was about the laughter between classes, midnight snacks in the dorm lounge, and the four people who turned into my chosen family: Sam, Jordan, Lily, and Alex. We weren't just friends, we were inseparable. Every memory I had of campus life had one of them in it. And among the four, it was Alex who always lingered in my mind a little longer than the rest. Alex had a quiet charm, someone who spoke less but always seemed to understand more. During our final year, we spent hours together at the campus cafe, talking about everything and nothing. There were moments I thought it could become something more, but timing never worked in our favor. Graduation pulled us in different directions, and like many college friendships, we promised to stay in touch. But life happened. Months passed with nothing more than the occasional social media like. Then, out of the blue, I got a message from Sam. "We're throwing a house party next weekend. All of us. You have to come." The thought of seeing them again filled me with joy and nerves. It had been so long. What would it feel like? Were we still the same? When I arrived at their new shared house, tucked behind rows of tall trees and painted in warm, inviting tones, I was greeted by familiar faces and tight embraces. The air was alive with music and memories. Laughter echoed through the halls, instantly transporting me back to simpler days. Lily handed me a drink as Jordan pulled me toward the living room. "It's just like old times," he said, his grin as wide as ever. Alex appeared shortly after, standing across the room, his eyes catching mine. That same quiet gaze, the one that once made me feel seen in a room full of noise, now made my heart race. He walked over slowly, smiling in that half-shy way I remembered. "It's been too long," he said. "Yeah," I replied, unsure if he could sense the flurry of old feelings rushing back. The five of us danced, reminisced, and toasted to the past. Alex stuck close, always finding ways to brush my arm or offer a drink. It felt intimate, warm, like something was blooming between us again. Every glance held a spark, every smile a silent question. Still, beneath the joy there was a flicker of unease, little things I couldn't quite name. A look exchanged between Jordan and Sam. Lily watching me too closely. I shook it off, telling myself it was nothing. But I didn't know then that this night, this house, these friends, would mark the end of my innocence. The music thumped gently through the walls, a mellow beat that blended with laughter and clinking glasses. Warm light bathed the living room as more guests filtered in, but my attention stayed with the core four, my friends, my constants. Or so I believed. Alex stayed by my side most of the evening, his presence both familiar and comforting. He handed me a second drink, amber-colored, smooth, sweeter than I expected. "Just a mix Lily made," he said, flashing that smile that once felt safe. I sipped it slowly, my nerves gradually easing. The room seemed to soften around the edges, and time folded gently like a page in a well-read book. We laughed, danced, and shared old stories that only we remembered. At one point, Alex took my hand and pulled me onto the patio. The night air was crisp, scented with pine and smoke from a nearby fire pit. "I missed this," he said softly, staring into the darkness beyond the trees. "Missed you?" I turned to face him. "I missed you too." And I meant it. His fingers brushed mine. It felt natural, familiar, even a little romantic. The world, for a moment, felt like it had clicked back into place. But something was shifting beneath the surface. My head felt light, not just from the drink, but as if my thoughts were beginning to blur. I blinked hard, trying to focus, but everything was becoming distorted. Faces stretching into shadows, voices echoing from distant corners of the house. "Think I need to sit," I murmured. Alex nodded and led me inside, guiding me down a hallway I didn't recognize. We entered a guest room dimly lit by a bedside lamp. "Just lie down for a bit, I'll check on you," he said, brushing a hand across my forehead. I tried to thank him, but the words tangled. My limbs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. I heard voices outside the door, Sam's, Jordan's, even Lily's, but their words slipped past me like smoke. Laughter followed. Then, the sound of the door clicking shut. The world collapsed into silence. When I woke, the light was gone. My head throbbed, my mouth dry as sand. I was alone. The room was in disarray, pillows on the floor, my phone buzzing endlessly on the nightstand. My clothes didn't feel quite right, and a wave of confusion flooded my chest. I sat up slowly, heart pounding, instincts screaming. I scrolled through my messages, dread twisting in my gut. One from Jordan read, "Hope you had fun. You were wild tonight." Another from Lily simply said, "Don't overthink it." The pit in my stomach widened. Something had happened, but I didn't remember it. I left the house before sunrise, my heart pounding louder than my footsteps. The street was silent, the early morning fog blurring everything like the haze inside my head. I couldn't make sense of what happened, or what didn't. But I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in my skin, in the strange emptiness that settled in my chest. When I got home, I locked the door behind me and sat on the floor. My clothes still smelled faintly of the party, but everything else felt distant, disconnected. I tried to recall details, conversations, touches, anything concrete, but the night came back only in flashes. The laughter, the hallway, the door, clicking shut. I checked my phone again, hoping the messages would make more sense in daylight. They didn't. Alex had sent a simple, "Hope you're okay. Last night was special." Special. My stomach turned. There was no affection in those words, no care, just coldness wrapped in casual tones. The kind of message you send when you don't expect a response. The kind of message that dares you to question what really happened. I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, searching for some version of myself I could recognize. But all I saw was someone broken, betrayed by the very people I had once trusted most. I didn't reach out to them. I couldn't. The idea of confrontation felt like a mountain I wasn't strong enough to climb. Instead, I stayed in, kept my phone on silent, and avoided mirrors. The isolation was heavy, but strangely comforting. In solitude, I didn't have to explain anything, to anyone. A week later, an old friend, Maya, reached out. We hadn't talked in months, but she noticed my absence online and grew concerned. I didn't tell her everything, just enough for her to know I wasn't okay. She didn't ask questions. She just listened. Sometimes that's all you need. Maya encouraged me to journal, to write down everything I could remember, even the confusion, even the blanks. She helped me find a therapist who specialized in trauma and consent. For the first time since that night, I felt like I had a sliver of control. Like maybe I wasn't crazy, like maybe this wasn't my fault. Therapy became a quiet refuge, a place where I could untangle the mess in my head without judgment. I cried in nearly every session, sometimes from pain, other times from relief. Each time I left a little lighter, but healing was slow. Some days I felt like I was making progress. Other days, the shame returned like a shadow. Still, the smallest part of me, some buried ember, was beginning to believe I could recover. And even as I grieved the friendship I had lost, I also began to mourn the person I used to be. Because after betrayal like that, you never go back. Months passed, and with each one, the weight of that night grew lighter, though never gone. Healing wasn't linear, and there were still days when the silence in my apartment screamed louder than any memory. But therapy helped me understand what I had lost, and more importantly, what I still had: my voice. One day, I opened my journal and began writing not just for myself, but for others. The entry started like a whisper. This is my story, and I survived. It felt raw, terrifying, but necessary. That sentence became a paragraph, then a chapter, and eventually a blog post. I didn't use names, didn't accuse, but I told the truth, my truth. To my surprise, the response was overwhelming. Messages from strangers poured in. Some shared their own experiences. Others offered support or simply thanked me for speaking up. That sense of isolation I had been drowning in began to crack. I wasn't alone. None of us were. Alex, Sam, Lily, and Jordan never reached out. Not once. At first, I kept expecting a message, an apology, an explanation, even a denial. But their silence spoke louder than anything they could have said, and that silence became my closure. I slowly started letting people into my life again. People like Maya, who had stayed even when I was at my lowest. I joined a small writing group, took long walks without headphones, and found joy in ordinary things. There was no grand turning point, no sudden burst of strength, just quiet, deliberate steps toward reclaiming who I was. Then came something unexpected. Love. It wasn't dramatic or fast. It was gentle. I met someone through my writing group. A soft-spoken artist named Noah who didn't ask about my past but listened when I was ready to share. He never tried to fix me. Instead, he held space for me to fix myself. For the first time in what felt like forever, I experienced affection without fear. With him, trust wasn't a leap. It was a slow build. And each moment we shared reminded me that intimacy, when rooted in respect, could still exist, even after betrayal. But I learned something even deeper. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant owning my story, not letting it own me. The pauisai. Pain I endured didn't define me, but my decision to keep moving forward did. Looking back now, I no longer see that night as the end of something. It was the breaking point, but also the beginning. It forced me to confront truths I didn't want to face and gave me the strength to write a new chapter. One where love exists, yes, but on my terms. And if there's one thing I've come to believe above all else, it's this. Even after the deepest betrayal, the heart can mend. Not because of others, but because we choose to heal.